Okay, welcome everybody to our WASA Zoom for the day. We are really glad to have Judy Bunkelman, who is licensing supervisor extraordinaire over at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Judy and I go way back to when I was heading up the Head Start ECAP team and she was heading up the licensing team for negotiated rulemaking. We spent a lot of hours in windowless conference rooms in Red Lions around the state. So she is going to talk to us a little bit about licensing, the way that licensing is adapting to COVID, and things that we should be thinking about and know about as we start opening our programs and planning for safety and what is happening in the fall or in the summer for the Head Start folks who are going to be opening up then. So Judy, I will let you take it away.
Okay, so this has been an incredible period of time, and licensing is doing all kinds of fun things trying to respond. I guess the very first thing I want to say is for guidance related to health and safety, DCYF is absolutely going with what DOH recommends. So we are not putting out our own little special do this, do that, do the other thing. We are always going back to what are DOH recommendations or your local public health or the CDC. We believe strongly that this should be a one voice, and they are the people with the expertise in dealing with this pandemic. So we kind of bend to them. That being said, we are not necessarily regulating to the recommendations that they put out. We are encouraging them, supporting them, asking people to try and comply with them. But until such time as either the governor or DOH itself says you must, we are still regulating to our general rules. And that's particularly where the question comes up most often is around group size, because it will be difficult for many people to maintain the group size of 1 to 9 that would have them meet the DOH recommendations of group size of 10 or fewer. So while we strongly recommend it, we strongly encourage it, we are not regulating to it at this time. We have put in place a COVID emergency waiver. So if providers have a need to operate a little differently during this time in response to COVID, we are processing these waivers and allowing things that generally we would not necessarily be open to. We would have people going through regular processes, but if it is absolutely a response to COVID, then we are considering them. To date, I believe that well over 400 of these have been processed. Probably 80% roughly have been approved. And they are everything from mixing age groups, attendance procedures. It's kind of anything that a provider needs to do in order to comply or to try and meet the need. In order for a waiver to be approved, an emergency waiver to be approved, however, we are asking that we want to see how they're meeting the recommendations of DOH. And the reason for that is because just by virtue of doing a waiver, a person is already operating outside of the WAC a little bit. And so we are putting those requirements on for the health and safety of children and the staff in the facilities. So we have also put in place an emergency licensing process that is available To date, we have not had anybody go through the process. We took the most of the 300 rule and figured out which pieces absolutely would have to be met for a short-term license, an emergency license. So these are not foundational quality standards. They are absolutely health and safety standards that we looked at. And if somebody should go through the emergency licensing process, it will only be good for 6 months maximum. It is not intended to be a way into licensing. It is intended to support a community that may have a, be in a childcare desert and just not have the available care. As I said, we have not had any go through the process. When we've talked with them and addressed the need, we have found that the need really can be met in their communities through licensed childcare. So to date, it has not been a big process. An emergency WAC has now been filed that will require providers to go into the provider portal in WACompass and record the number of available slots they have by age group and to report if they are open or closed due to COVID-19. This is an emergency rule that will expire in September. The intent of this is absolutely because we need the data as we're making decisions, requesting variances from the feds, looking at how we need to plan to go forward. So that one you should be getting notified of that one very, very soon. And then on a subject that really isn't COVID related, but maybe of interest, is that in the legislature this year, they did approve the concept that a license can be transferred. So we are in the process of developing the WAC and the policies around what it would look like to transfer a license from one owner to another. So that one's coming out real soon. I'm guessing you received the email on the grants that are available for licensed childcare providers. I do not know a lot about those because that was kind of handled on a different end of the house, but they are out there and we're encouraging people to apply if they would help them. And one other thing that we are working on right now is the school age WAC update. We had originally hoped to have that in place by August 1st. COVID-19 has pushed all of that back, so it'll be sometime in the fall. So those are the big things that we're doing. Right now, it has been absolutely crazy, but what I'd like to do is answer questions, concerns, engage in a conversation if you have things you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, so anybody who has a question can unmute themselves or you can write it in the chat. Do you know, for that fund, is that like a merit-based or is it a first come, first serve, or is there any anticipation that like some of these other COVID-related things that the money is going to run out? I know that a lot of providers ended up not getting the PPP, for example, on the federal level, but so do you know anything about that?
What I do know is that they're saying that it is merit and WACompass based in terms of capacity. That's how they'll determine the capacity, and that people can apply up until June 30th or until the money runs out. So I'm guessing that they expect the money will run out at some point, but I don't know when.
All right, well, folks, let your subcontractors know if you have any that they should apply. Don't leave money on the table when everybody is starving here. And
This is Kim. I was on the call yesterday for DCYF, and there's 29, I think it was 29 billion or 29 million. Isn't that weird? I can't remember which one. There's such a huge difference.
It's a million.
A million, thank you. Anyway, that were available and that it is going to be first come, first serve, and you have to apply on WaCompass.
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe Friday.
Yeah, they're hoping to have they are working really hard to get that application on WaCompass by Friday. I would certainly be checking Friday. And if it's not there, I'd be checking again first thing Monday.
Yep. Are licensors doing visits at this time?
Oh, that's the other thing I forgot. Right now, we are not doing visits. We are, unless it is an emergent situation, we are finishing up our protocols for how we will be doing our work going forward, because we don't expect that we're going to return to normal anytime soon. So we are developing a protocol to do virtual visits, and then we would do what we're calling kind of a verification health and safety walkthrough. So we are starting that primarily with initial licenses, because they are, especially for centers, the easiest to do the social distancing on and kind of arranging it in a way that allows us to do that verification that health and safety things are in place. But we expect and anticipate moving into monitors and just kind of getting back to doing our work in a different way sometime within the next month. So we're starting it now, trying to make sure that the processes we're putting in place are actually going to work. And once we're pretty comfortable that they are going to work, then we will kind of roll it out more generally.
So this might be a little bit too deep in the weeds here, but I'm wondering about all those paperwork pieces that you guys do when you visit a site, and FERPA requirements that we have, and HIPAA. What is that? Are you guys going to be able to do that kind of thing remotely? What's the?
We are trying to work it so that as much as possible, we are doing things virtually. So we're having the conversations, we're asking the questions. I don't know that we've gotten down to looking at staff files, but it may be that we're, so much of it now is recorded in Merit, that we'll be reviewing our Merit account, the Merit accounts before we even attempt to go out. Some providers are engaging in virtual visits where they're using FaceTime or Zoom to kind of show us the facilities, so that truly by the time we go out, it is a very minimal visit. We are hoping to get those health and safety visits to half an hour at most. We really want them to be walkthroughs. Now on an initial, because other people are not in the building, it's a little easier for us to go in and spend a little more time. Just to provide a little more of the technical assistance, but we are even having to try and get through to our licensors that if they go out and do this health and safety check and they see things that are not compliant, what they need to do is say, I'll call you later on that, and have the conversation later, rather than we want to minimize our time for the time being until we move to a different stage of this.
So talk a little bit about teacher-child ratio. I know you said that was something, at least group size, and I guess the associated ratios. That's not something that you guys are looking at, right? I mean, you are recommending, but not enforcing the health department. Are you guys hearing anything about what that might look like in a couple of months, or, what are you, and
we are
ratios as well? Are you guys thinking about not just group size, but ratios?
We are not hearing a lot about about what may be coming, and I think that partly that's because DOH is really tied to CDC, and CDC is still making those recommendations. One of the things that, in looking at the DOH recommendations for childcare, there's a whole list of things that are included there. And so what we kind of are encouraging is that people do as many and as much of it as they possibly can. So until we're told differently, we are still recommending a group size of 10 people, including staff. And so depending on the age of children, that may be 1 to 9 or 1 to 7 or 1 to 8. We are doing some waivers to child to staff ratio in order to allow providers to maximize the use of their staff and yet still keep the group sizes smaller. But one of the things that I particularly notice in the DOH recommendations that doesn't get a lot of talk is they talk about the consistency of the group. So I guess if I were a provider out there, I'd be looking at this list that includes keeping this group of children together, not bringing in different kids on different days, but keeping this group of children with this provider might be one of the strategies I could employ even if I couldn't do the group size of 10. So we're just kind of asking people to be as thoughtful and creative as possible in terms of how they can run their program so that it makes sense and yet still provides for the health and safety of children as much as possible, and their staff. I mean, it comes down to their staff. We had a situation yesterday that came up in Spokane, a toddler, no symptoms, no signs. Saturday had a little flare of asthma, and they took him in and he tested positive. And, you know, they were screening, they were doing absolutely everything right in the child care facility. They had no clue this child was ill. So we know that those things are going to happen. And so the smaller or the more contained we can keep the group size, the more likely it is that instead of a whole center having to close or needing to close for a while, maybe just that classroom could, you know. So those are the kind of things we're encouraging people to think about, to kind of plan for. None of us know what this is going to look like in a month. I mean, I don't have any inside information on that. It's kind of, I listen to the governor right along with everybody else to see what's coming now. We're planning for different contingencies, but we don't know which ones are going to be needed, which is why we're doing the virtual visits, because we're anticipating that it will be a long time before we return to normal. But maybe in August they'll say, go out and party. We just don't know.
So I think what I'm hearing you say, there's a question on here, is a stable group size of 10 required, or could providers have 10 at a time but provide 20 children over the course of a week? And I think I'm hearing you say that's allowable, but not desired as part of the health department recommendations that you have a consistent group.
That's correct. It's, again, we're not regulating to it. It's just one of the recommendations.
So are you finding there are other elements of the health department recommendations that people are finding it particularly difficult to comply with?
I think the biggest one is the group size and the consistent grouping. And particularly for centers that operate, you know, covering the entire age range, and they often support their infant rooms by their school age programs, and now all of a sudden their school age programs are down to 9 kids. So that is impacting them financially. I'm getting a lot of waivers right now for attendance records to be dealt with differently, so that they're, I wouldn't say it's difficult for them to comply with. It's more a case of needing to do things a little differently than outlined in WAC. And so those were, are not a problem, with the exception that if somebody has subsidy dollars, I have to make sure that they're very clear that our waiver, they need to make sure that it complies with subsidy requirements also, because I don't have the authority to waive subsidy requirements. So
we're talking specifically here about electronic attendance and the parents checking the child in, but that would be on the same
yes.
computer or whatever every time, so everybody would be touching the same place on your, so you're talking about maybe having the staff check people in rather than have the parent check themselves in. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we have a lot of providers that are opting to go that way. And what we're asking them to do that is have the parent sign something that says, yes, I'm giving the staff permission to sign my child in and out during COVID.
Okay.
So,
can you elaborate a little bit more about classroom safety recommendations that you guys are looking at?
we really are just going with the DOH guidelines. And so we're encouraging people to remove things that cannot be cleaned and sanitized. To do the cleaning and sanitizing, the WAC actually has pretty good standards in it. We're just asking them to bump them up a little bit, do it a little more often. For infants and toddlers, we're really asking them to pay attention to things that hit the mouth. And then in terms of if you have a large space, to find a way to create two spaces so that you can have two groups in it without those groups intermingling. One of the things that we all know is that when you're talking children, you're not going to have social distancing be very effective in terms of the 6 foot, which is part of where we like the consistent group, is at least you've got the same kids spitting on each other. But basic health and safety are the same, other than the cleaning and the soft stuffed animals and those kinds of things that we're kind of asking that for right now, if possible, to remove as many of those, or to be making sure that they get washed and sanitized routinely.
Mm-hmm. So the child care center grant, that's only for centers that are open, right? Currently open?
That's correct.
Yeah. So Dallas is asking how many kids who were in the child care with the kiddo who tested positive, how many were there? Was that in a center?
I truly do not know. I know that the facility has chosen to close the entire facility for 2 weeks while everybody's being tested. They had all their staff, everybody was tested. So that's the good news, is that things have ramped up enough now that that's possible to do. But they have asked. The results of those tests are not all back yet.
So when that happens, does the health department come in and test everybody who had contact? What's the procedure there for a program?
I truly don't know, because what they do is let us know they closed, but we put them in touch with the health department. So I'm sure that the health department walks them through what places to go get tested. Mm-hmm. That has evolved so quickly. It's all over the place.
Yeah. So can you talk about recommendations for PPE for staff and children and classroom cleaning and disinfecting?
Well, the PPE question is one that keeps coming up, and I'm not sure we have an incredibly clear answer. They do talk about specifically if you're going to have a floater entering a classroom that is otherwise contained, that they should wear a mask every time they go in. The recommendation is, if it's possible, that children and staff, children over age 2 and staff wear masks, but it's kind of clearly identified if it's possible. We know that with children, if they're constantly touching and pulling and readjusting, then it's less effective than not wearing one at all. So we're not pushing hard on that. It's just kind of, if it's a doable thing, great. If it's not, wash your hands frequently. Those are we go back to the same things that they told us right at the beginning: wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands, and clean and disinfect in between. The DOH website does have some pretty good guidance on the best way to deal with the cleaning and disinfecting, but it's not very different from what's already in WAC. It's just do it more often. And certainly if there's any reason to believe there was exposure, take the opportunity to do a really, really deep cleaning.
We had a report about one kiddo who said that his name was such and such, and he was from Vancouver. Wash your hands.
I like it. Makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Okay, so since we must remain open, if someone at the center tests positive and we have to close the center for 2-week quarantine, would we have to pay back the grant?
I don't believe you would have to pay back the grant in those situations, because that would be not really a voluntary closure, even if DOH didn't tell you to close, if you were doing it in order to contain the virus. But I honestly cannot answer that.
Yeah,
but I don't believe that if it's already been paid out that you would be required to, if you were responding to the pandemic.
Yeah, I think that I think that there's guidance in there around having plans to reopen. So
Right.
maybe some deadlines related to reopening there.
And I know that DOH is working with different locations. Some are being asked to shut down for 72 hours, and then they can do limited opening. I mean, it just kind of depends on the situation. So the reopening is what matters.
What is the rationale for 72 hours?
I think because it gives time to do the deep cleaning and to get the testing going.
Okay, I got you.
So they'd have an idea of just how big an exposure this was. Nice kitty.
Yeah. Louis likes morning meetings. He really likes to join us all. Other questions out there? Okay, so let's see here. We run a number of school-age childcare programs and temporarily closed many of them for a couple months in light of the pandemic. We did so out of an abundance of caution, no confirmed cases at the center. We're in the process of developing a plan to reopen some of these centers in order to support the need for childcare over the summer. Our licenses are current, but we're being told by our local licensors that they need to come and inspect the centers and complete health and safety checklists again. Can you help me understand why this is necessary before we reopen?
If they were closed because of COVID, that is not correct. And I would like to know which offices are telling you that, because we made the decision that for COVID closures, we are not requiring a health and safety recheck prior to reopening.
So
that doesn't mean we won't be popping out there. It just means that that is not a criteria for reopening. And I need to become aware of what office is telling you that, because they obviously didn't get the memo.
So that's Vancouver, Jackie. Yeah, Jackie, I can give you Judy's information, and you guys can all follow up on that so that you can make sure that you can get open. Other questions? It would be very valuable to have the data on how many tested positive at that center. Like if everyone is positive but no symptoms, for example, that would be very valuable data to have for those of us that are wanting to reopen and reassure our staff. So that's an interesting point. Yeah, have you?
We will not ever receive that data. DCYF will not receive that data because that's not something that we're in any way responsible for having. I think the best opportunity to get it is whether or not it shows up on the evening news.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a good question. You know, if we had more information about, you know, this kiddo tested positive and then, you know, half of our staff and half of our people ended up getting COVID, that really underscores the need to close for 2 or more weeks. But if the transmission is a lot lower, it may reassure staff who are concerned even about coming back to work in the fall, right? Okay, so if I have a particular issue that I want advice on related to the DOH recommendations, do I contact our health department nurse or my licensor?
You can go either way, but if it is really very specific DOH, not in terms of, do you have ideas on how I can make this work in my facility, then I would be going to DOH. If you're looking for some support in terms of, can I do this, or do you have any ideas on what may or may not work, then you could go either direction.
So Jennifer Helseth, who is at DCYF and is sort of the liaison between health and ECAP, and maybe Head Start as well, says, I'm happy to talk with people about the DOH guidance, or you can go to your local health department. She is on the team that wrote it. So Jennifer, maybe you know what we might see coming down the pike. I think one of the challenges of everybody as they start their planning for the fall is just the huge level of uncertainty about what our you know, what our ratios and group sizes might be. Is there any, do you have any early information about whether or not there's going to be changes, or should we just do our planning moving forward based on Ken?
So Katie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I will echo what Judy said. We don't have any further knowledge. Basically, everything that's coming out of the Department of Health and the guidance that we wrote came directly from the CDC. So at this point, the guidance that we have is sticking with the 10 people per space, and really emphasizing kind of the action that Judy was giving about, like, if you have a space that's big enough to be able to pull it to 2 spaces, really being extra cautious about the idea of floaters. Things we have found across our state is that the floaters are the people who are bringing germs into the different group sizes. And I know that that's really hard when you're working with healthcare settings to not use that position. But as of right now, I will echo exactly what Judy said. And I wish I had more, you know, a crystal ball to be able to push it further. But where we have revised the guidance 3 times since this began, and as of this point we've received nothing further. So I wish I could give everybody some. Sorry, my daughter just like stabbed me with a pen. It was not on purpose. But yeah, I don't have anything further than that. I'm happy to, if there was a particular issue, Kim, for example, I am happy to talk with you, or you can feel free to go to your licensor if it's more licensing specific.
Well, Jennifer, maybe the next time we get an update from CDC, you and I can touch base and we can do a webinar like this for that next stage Q&A.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah. Carolyn asked if Start is not reopening until the fall. Caroline, it really depends on the program. Some will be opening up. Certainly Migrant Seasonal are all opening, and Full Day, Full Year may be opening, and then programs that got the grants to do summer Head Start, they will be opening up as well, but it really depends on the location. Other questions out there? I mean, I do have one question, which is, do you actually have a popcorn maker in your house? Is that?
Okay, you are the first person to notice that, but yes.
That's awesome.
This family eats a lot of popcorn.
Uh,
Not me, the family.
All right, other questions? All right, I am sure that, oh, here's, is there a place where oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Is there a place where the guidance can be found for reference? We're trying to open June 1st. And yes, where's the best place for people to go for all of the health and licensing guidance?
For licensing, it is the dcyf.wa.gov website, and then click on COVID-19. And then there is a tab for early learning and schools, I think is what it says, or early learning and childcare. But there also is DOH, the DOH website. And I think it's just doh.wa.gov and COVID-19.
All right, I will find that and paste it into the chat. Another question is, there's a strong recommendation to keep kids outside as much as possible. And am I correct that not using the play structure is recommended?
If you're going to use a play structure, it's between groups of kids, we would be encouraging or recommending that it be cleaned and sanitized. The not using play structures, from my understanding, is really a bigger issue in public locations, but nonetheless, they still recommend that, like in center environments where you have different groups of children, that then there be a process to clean and disinfect it in between kids or sanitize. I always get my sanitize and disinfect mixed up. But either way, you want to make it so that they're not transferring germs from one classroom to another.
Yeah. All right, other questions? Judy, I was wondering what the most common waivers were that you're getting. I mean, apart from the check-in attendance.
It's really been kind of interesting because they come in waves of interest, and I have a whole bunch that for a while was the mixed grouping. And that had to do with the fact that census was so low in so many centers that they were trying to keep open to meet families, but they didn't have enough children to run different classrooms. So that was a huge one for a while. Right now it's the attendance. I've done some for capacity to increase capacity in both family homes and centers. And in some school-based programs, we've had quite a few to use unlicensed space so that they could go into those classrooms that are closed, but with school kids, they can keep their group size to 10 and serve more kids. So we've done quite a few of those also.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so how are you holding up, Judy? That is one of the questions here from Dallas.
Well, every once in a while I get a little cranky, but hanging in there, hoping everybody else is too.
I mean, Judy has a popcorn maker, so she's ahead of the rest of us. And yes, and then I think our final question here is, when will life be normal again? The old normal, not the new.
I figure right after I retire in 3 years.
Well, that's just depressing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Judy. For all of you, this is being recorded, and so we'll put it up on the YouTube, and it'll be linked to in next week's WASA Monday email that you will all be on the list for. And thank you so much, Judy, for joining us and giving us the updates. And I will probably call upon you again as we move forward in this, because it seems like everything is a little bit of a moving target, and we're all trying to plan based on constantly shifting sands. And so I want to thank you for your time, and thank everybody who attended.
Well, thanks for having me. Have
Thanks,
a wonderful
everybody.
day.